You know, folks, I watched Mr. Coat, or the fellow in the coat's video that he did to finish up his Animaniacs month, and I want to do a bit of a response on that. Now, what he pointed out about Minerva's character in that profile, pretty much he did hit on every chord. You see, when Minerva was created, she was created, well, in the eyes of many fans, which she did gain, it's a very funny character, very funny reactional character. However, the only problem Minerva had, though, was the fact that she was basically created by Paul Dini and Sharon Stone, but she was accidentally created as being over-sexualized. In other words, critics, whether it was parental critics or television critics or critics involved with the Children's Television Board, particularly weren't too fond about Minerva. No, they weren't too fond of her at all. I mean, true, they would accept her as a character, but they didn't accept the fact that she was over-sexualized. There were certain situations, as Mr. Coat pointed out, that kind of showed that she was being over-sexualized. Like in her first cartoon, Meet Minerva, which ironically was aired as her second cartoon, but was actually her first in production. There's a silhouette, sort of like a few minutes into the cartoon, where it's a silhouette of her basically taking a bath in a pool, in a lake. And she basically takes off a towel she has, that you see a silhouette of her in the nude. Excuse me. Now, that would raise concern for a lot of parents, seeing as though you don't really see that in animation that much, especially nowadays or even then. But you see, the purpose for her was originally to be sort of like a Marilyn Monroe-ish character, and sort of in the same, well, kind of created with that same kind of Marilyn Monroe-ish like attribute, but combined with the wackiness of some of the red hot ladies of Tex Avery's fame. Basically, she had the Marilyn Monroe attributes combined with the characteristics of the Tex Avery red hot Riding Hood character, redhead if you will. She basically was a combination of all that together. And did it succeed for her as a character? As far as fans are concerned, yeah, it did succeed for her as a character. Because he was somebody that pretty much got over, and I don't think Warner Brothers expected it. But she did. She got over. Now, what made Minerva very unique and different, I think, to the fans was, on one hand, you had a lot of the males go crazy for her and go gaga for her every time she passed by. But when she would encounter a handsome male counterpart of herself, she would do exactly what they did. Exactly what the males did to her. She would go gaga. She would go crazy. She would go into wild, zany outtakes. In fact, I'm kind of surprised Mr. Coat didn't mention that one of the things that Minerva did, and this is actually talked about in some of the Wikipedias, like the Animaniacs Wikipedia pages and site, that one of the things Minerva did in both her solo cartoons was melt into a puddle. Production-wise in Meet Minerva, when she melts into a puddle, she runs basically into the arms of the cousin of her best friend and melts literally right through his hands. And she melts by melting, she splits right in half. You know, he's holding her like this, and one half goes this way, the other half goes that way. And she's able to reform herself into a kind of a loud boat horn, if you will. And then, in her second appearance, production-wise, her second short production-wise, which would actually be her first appearance, first solo cartoon aired, but second in production, Moon Over Minerva, she does a lustful melt gag, if you will, when she sees Wilford's alter ego, his werewolf alter ego, and she melts into a creamy puddle that, as I've mentioned many times before, has to be reformed by Wilford picking her up and wringing her and drying her out like a wet towel. That's the only way she got reformed back from being in a puddle-fied state, if you will. But yeah, those are basically some of those zany, wild outtakes that, as Mr. Coal put it, Minerva would go through to kind of balance things out. When any of the guys would go crazy for her, she would do the exact same thing, if not add on something even more so. Now, yeah, they did tone down on Minerva a little bit, appearance-wise. I mean, she's the only character, I think, in any Looney Tune-inspired cartoon series to only have 2 shorts, and that's it. And well, everybody else had more than their share. But again, her appearances were toned down to where it was cameos, supporting roles, you name it. All because of the fact of she had been over-sexualized and in the eyes of the critics, in the eyes of some of the people in charge at Warner Brothers and stuff like that. However, fans still support her. There's several sites dedicated to Minerva. There's the Minerva Pond Haven, among many. Minerva Mink fan page, you name it. You know, you go to DeviantArt, there's a Minerva Mink fan club group there. I mean, there's a lot of Minerva Mink fans all over the place, and it's all because they look at this character as a character that's very popular, very funny, but was never really given a chance because she only got 2 solo cartoons. Now, she did expand into solo adventures and all that through the Animaniacs comics, which kind of carried on what she had done in the 2 solo cartoons. In fact, there's even one issue she stars in, one story she stars in an issue where she does a sort of a lustful melt gag on a store clerk at a jewelry store. So, or something like that. She does a lustful melt gag there to where it's only her head sticking out of the puddle, if you will. So, but Minerva is definitely a character that should have been given more of an opportunity. Unfortunately, it never happened. But in my opinion, I think she is very underrated, but still has a very strong fan base that I believe wants to see her brought back to the forefront, and that's no lie.